The smell of sawdust and motor oil had become my perfume. For the past 15 years, those scents meant honest work, simple tasks, problems I could actually fix. I stood in the maintenance shed of Desert Vista Apartments in Phoenix, organizing my tools for the afternoon's jobs. Unit 4B needed a new garbage disposal. Unit 7A had a leaky faucet. Mrs. Patterson in 12C wanted her ceiling fan balanced. Small tasks, fixable problems. The kind of work where you could see the results, where nobody got hurt, where the worst thing that could happen was a stripped screw or a stubborn pipe fitting. My hands moved with the same precision they'd once used to draft blueprints for skyscrapers. Muscle memory doesn't care about fall from grace. It just remembers what the fingers learned to do. I was 64 years old, and this was my life now. A one-bedroom apartment with a view of the parking lot. A 15-year-old pickup truck that still ran if you knew its moods. A job that paid enough to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional paperback from the used bookstore on Camelback Road. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, nothing that could hurt anyone. My phone buzzed on the workbench. Unknown number, Chicago area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. Probably a scam call about my car's extended warranty. But something made me pick it up. Is this Richard Morrison? A woman's voice, professional, measured, speaking. Mr. Morrison, this is Eleanor Vance from Hartfield and Associates. I'm calling regarding the estate of Catherine Morrison. My hand stopped moving. Catherine. I hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Hadn't allowed myself to think it, to remember the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd built an empire with, the woman who'd let me burn so she could rise from the ashes. I see. I'm sorry to inform you that Mrs. Morrison passed away last Thursday. The funeral service is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. Following the service, there will be a reading of the will at our offices at 4:30. Your attendance has been specifically requested. The words seemed to come from very far away, like someone was speaking underwater. Catherine was dead. The woman I'd loved more than my own ambition. The woman I'd sacrificed everything for. The woman who'd never visited me once during those 3 years in federal prison, never answered my letters, never told our daughter the truth. Mr. Morrison, are you still there? Yes. I'm here. Will you be able to attend? Every instinct screamed at me to decline. What business did I have at Catherine's funeral? I was the disgraced ex-husband, the convicted felon, the man whose name was synonymous with the Morrison Plaza collapse. 3 people had died when that building's parking structure failed, 3 families destroyed, and everyone believed it was my fault because I'd told them it was. But something in me, some stubborn remnant of the man I'd once been, whispered that I should go, that I owed Catherine that much. Or maybe I owed it to myself. I'll be there. After I hung up, I sat on my workbench for a long time, staring at the pegboard wall where my tools hung in neat rows. Chicago. I hadn't been back to Chicago in 15 years. Hadn't seen my daughter Megan since the trial, when she'd sat in the front row of the courtroom with tears streaming down her face as the judge read the verdict. She'd been 23 then, fresh out of architecture school, just starting at Morrison and Cole. Now she was 38, and according to the business magazines I sometimes flipped through at the library, she was the CEO of one of the most successful architectural firms in the Midwest. Catherine had groomed her well. I walked back to my apartment, called Mrs. Patterson to reschedule her ceiling fan, and dug through my closet for my one good suit. Navy blue, probably out of style by now, but still clean and pressed. I'd worn it to job interviews that never went anywhere, to meetings with parole officers, to the rare occasions when I needed to look like someone who'd once mattered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen Catherine, 3 months after my sentencing. She'd come to visit me at the Federal Correctional Facility in Terre Haute, the only time she ever came. Why? I'd asked her, through the glass partition. Why did you let me do this? Because you offered, she'd said, her voice steady and cold. And because Megan's future was more important than your pride. She's my daughter too. Not anymore. Catherine had stood up, smoothed her designer blazer. As far as the world is concerned, you're dead to us. It's better that way. Cleaner. She'd walked out without looking back. I'd taken a bus to Phoenix the day I was released, changed my name on everything except my driver's license, and started over with nothing but a criminal record and hands that still remembered how to fix things. The flight to Chicago was 6 hours of staring at clouds and trying not to think. The woman next to me talked about her grandchildren until she noticed I wasn't responding, then buried herself in a romance novel. Chicago looked different. More glass towers reaching toward the sky, more construction cranes, more ambition made concrete and steel. Some of those buildings might have been designed by Morrison and Cole, designed by my daughter, using skills I'd taught her before I became someone she was ashamed to know. I checked into a budget hotel near O'Hare, not the kind of place anyone from my old life would be caught dead in. Changed into my navy suit, knotted my tie with hands that barely shook, and took an Uber to Graceland Cemetery. The November wind cut through my jacket like it had personal business with my bones. Chicago cold is different from Phoenix heat. It doesn't just make you uncomfortable. It reminds you that the world doesn't care whether you live or die. There were more cars than I'd expected. Catherine had transformed Morrison and Cole from a struggling partnership into one of the premier architectural firms in the country. Of course, people would come, board members, clients, politicians, the kind of people who showed up to funerals hoping to be seen. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, half hidden behind a monument to some long-dead industrialist. From there, I could see the green canopy, the rows of black-clad mourners, and at the front, my daughter. Megan looked so much like Catherine at that age. Same dark hair, same sharp features, same posture that said she owned every room she walked into. She stood perfectly still while the minister spoke about legacy and vision and the buildings that would stand as Catherine's monuments for generations. I didn't let myself be seen. When the service ended and people began moving toward their cars, I walked in the opposite direction, hands in my pockets, collar turned up against the wind. The law offices of Hartfield and Associates occupied the penthouse floor of a building I didn't recognize, probably built in the last decade while I was learning how to fix garbage disposals in Phoenix. The lobby was all marble and modern art, the kind of space designed to make ordinary people feel small. I arrived early and waited in a leather chair that probably cost more than my truck. At 4:15, I took the elevator to the top floor and gave my name to a receptionist who looked at me like I'd wandered in from the wrong tax bracket. Conference room B, down the hall, second door, on the left. The conference room was floor-to-ceiling windows, with a view of the Chicago skyline, the Hancock Building, the old water tower, and in the distance, Morrison Plaza, rebuilt and renamed after the tragedy. I wondered if they'd kept any of the original design, or if they'd gutted everything and started fresh. Several people were already seated around a long table, faces I half recognized from the business pages. They stopped talking when I entered, and the silence had edges. I took a seat near the door, as far from the main group as I could get, folded my hands, and waited. Megan arrived at exactly 4:30. She moved like Catherine had, all purpose and control, like time was something she owned and chose to spend. She walked directly to the head of the table without looking around, and sat in what had probably been her mother's chair during board meetings. Then she saw me. For just a moment, her composure cracked. Her eyes went wide, and the color drained from her face like someone had pulled a plug. "What are you doing here?" Her voice could have frozen the Lake Michigan. "I was invited," I said quietly, "by Miss Vance. This is family business. You lost that right when you—" She stopped herself, glanced at the other people in the room. "When you did what you did." I kept my hands steady, my voice calm. "I'm here because I was asked to be here." Before she could respond, the door opened, and Eleanor Vance entered. She was older than she'd sounded on the phone, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of presence that came from decades of delivering bad news to people who could afford good lawyers. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming." She took a seat at the center of the table, positioning herself like a referee. "I know this is a difficult time, so I'll try to be as efficient as possible." She opened a leather portfolio and withdrew a thick document bound in dark blue covers. The last will and testament of Catherine Elizabeth Morrison, executed on April 3rd of this year. Before we begin with the specific bequests, Mrs. Morrison left instructions that her opening statement be read aloud in full. She adjusted her glasses and began to read. To those gathered here, if you are hearing this, then I am gone, and it's time for truths that should have been told long ago. I have lived my life building things, buildings, a company, a reputation, but I also destroyed something far more valuable, and I stayed silent about it for 15 years, because the truth was inconvenient. The room had gone very quiet. I could hear someone's watch ticking. Richard Morrison did not falsify the structural reports for Morrison Plaza. He did not bribe the building inspector. He did not cause the deaths of those 3 people. I know this because I did all of those things. Someone gasped. Megan's face had gone from pale to ash gray. In 2009, Eleanor Vance continued reading. Our company was struggling. We'd taken on the Morrison Plaza project with inadequate capital reserves, and we were hemorrhaging money on cost overruns. I made the decision to cut corners on the parking structure foundation. When the soil tests came back showing instability, I buried the reports and had new ones fabricated. When the building inspector raised concerns, I paid him to look the other way. Richard discovered what I'd done 2 weeks before the collapse. He confronted me, threatened to go to the authorities. I begged him not for my sake, but for Megan's. She'd just joined the firm. Any scandal would destroy her career before it started. Richard loved his daughter more than he loved justice, so he made me an offer. He would take responsibility. He would claim the falsified reports were his doing, that he'd accepted the bribes. In exchange, I would protect Megan, guide her career, ensure she never learned the truth about either of us. I agreed. I let him sacrifice himself, his reputation, his freedom. 3 people died because of my decisions, and I let my husband go to prison for it. I've spent 15 years building an empire on his silence. Eleanor Vance paused, took a sip of water. The other people in the room weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at Megan, who sat frozen, her hands gripping the table edge so hard her knuckles had turned white. I'm not asking for forgiveness. There is none for what I've done. But Richard deserves to have his name cleared. He was innocent of everything except loving his family too much. This will is my confession, and these bequests are my penance. Eleanor set down the first page and continued. To the families of Thomas Chen, Maria Gutierrez, and David Park, the 3 people who died in the Morrison Plaza collapse, I leave $10 million each. No amount of money can undo their loss, but perhaps it can ease their burdens. To my executive team, James Sullivan, Patricia Wong, and Marcus Cole, I leave $2 million each in recognition of your service. To the Richard Morrison Foundation for Architectural Ethics, which I have established and funded with $20 million, to ensure that what I did never happens again. Then she turned to look directly at Megan. To my daughter, Megan Elizabeth Morrison. Megan straightened slightly. Megan, you are my greatest achievement and my greatest failure. I gave you every advantage, every opportunity. But I also taught you that winning matters more than how you win. I built your career on lies and let you believe your father was a monster. I hope someday you can forgive me for the second, even if you never forgive me for the first. I leave you the sum of $38, $1 for each year of your life, and the following instruction. Learn what integrity means before you try to lead again. The silence that followed was absolute. Megan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. The remainder of my estate, Eleanor read, including all shares of Morrison and Cole Architects, all properties, all investments, and all other assets, totaling approximately $175 million, I leave to my former husband, Richard Morrison, the only honest person in our partnership and the only one who deserved to build something that would last. The room erupted, not loudly. We were still Midwesterners after all, but erupted nonetheless. Murmurs, shuffling, the sound of people trying to process information that didn't fit their understanding of the world. I sat very still, my hands still folded on the table, feeling nothing, or maybe feeling everything at once, which amounts to the same thing. There's more, Eleanor said. Mrs. Morrison left a private letter for Mr. Morrison. She withdrew a cream-colored envelope from her portfolio and slid it across the table. My name was written on the front in Catherine's precise handwriting. She requested you read this privately. The estate matters can wait until next week. She went on talking about trusts and transfers and tax implications, but I'd stopped listening. I was staring at the envelope, at the ghost of Catherine's hand moving across the paper. Megan stood up so abruptly her chair screeched against the floor. This is insane. She was dying. She wasn't thinking clearly. I'm going to contest this. Mrs. Morrison was evaluated by 4 different physicians in her final months, Eleanor said calmly. All certified she was of sound mind. She anticipated challenges and took appropriate precautions. The will is legally airtight. He's a convicted felon. Megan pointed at me, her hand shaking. He went to federal prison. He pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to protect you, Eleanor said quietly. As your mother just explained. No. Megan shook her head. No, that's not. He couldn't have. She looked at me then. Really looked for the first time since I'd walked in. I saw her taking in my outdated suit, my weathered face, my calloused hands, trying to reconcile this image with the villain she'd built in her mind. The father who'd cared more about money than human life. The disgrace she'd worked so hard to distance herself from. Is it true? Her voice cracked. Did you really take the fall for her? I met her eyes, Catherine's eyes, that same deep brown, and nodded. Why? Why would you do that? Because you were my daughter, I said. And I loved you. The past tense hung between us like an accusation. Because I had loved her. The little girl I'd carried on my shoulders at the zoo, who'd learned to draw floor plans before she learned long division, who'd told me at 8 years old that she wanted to build things that touched the sky. But that girl was gone. This woman standing before me, trembling with rage and confusion, was a stranger. Megan's face crumpled for just a moment. Then she turned and walked out of the conference room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Within 10 minutes, everyone else had made their excuses and left. Just Eleanor Vance and me, alone with the view of the city I'd once helped build. That was more dramatic than most readings, she said, allowing herself a small smile. Catherine always did like making an entrance. Even her exits had to be memorable. Eleanor began packing her papers. You don't seem particularly happy for a man who just inherited $175 million. Most men in my situation wouldn't be in my situation. She smiled again, warmer this time. Mrs. Morrison said you'd react this way. She said you'd probably give most of it away. She knew me well. She loved you, you know, even after everything. Maybe especially after everything. Eleanor snapped her, portfolio closed. I'll leave you to read her letter. Take your time. The room is reserved for another 2 hours. After she left, I sat alone in that glass and chrome room, watching the sun set over Chicago, the city where I'd built my career, my family, my life, all of it gone now, and somehow given back in the strangest possible way. I picked up the envelope, felt its weight. Part of me didn't want to open it, didn't want to hear Catherine's voice again, even through written words. But I broke the seal anyway. The letter was dated 6 months before her death. Richard, if you're reading this, then I've finally done the one honest thing of my miserable life. I hope death gave me the courage that life never did. This letter is not an apology. Words can't undo what I did to you. Consider it a confession, a final accounting from a woman who spent 30 years cooking the books on her own soul. I found out I was dying 18 months ago. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months. I've stretched it to 18 through sheer stubbornness and expensive treatments. But even money has limits. When I got the diagnosis, my first thought was relief. Not about dying. Dying is terrifying, Richard, no matter how ready you think you are. But relief that I finally had an excuse to tell the truth. What was the company compared to death? What was reputation compared to meeting whatever comes next without the weight of lies dragging me down? But even then, I hesitated. I told myself I needed to arrange things properly, make sure Megan would be protected, structure the succession. Lies. All lies. The truth is, I was still a coward, even facing death. It was Megan who finally pushed me to act. 3 months ago, she came to me excited about a new project, a massive development in Gary, Indiana. Affordable housing, she said, revitalizing a community. She showed me the plans, the projections, the cost-cutting measures, and I saw myself in her. The same willingness to bend rules, the same confidence that corners could be cut without consequences, the same certainty that results mattered more than methods. I asked her about soil testing. She waved it off. "We'll handle it." That's when I knew I'd taught her the wrong lessons. I'd taught her that success justifies any cost, that morality is flexible when money is involved. I'd taught her these things by example, by staying silent about what I did, by letting you become her cautionary tale of weakness. I made you into the villain in her story, the father who couldn't be trusted, the proof that sentiment and integrity lead to disaster. I created something terrible, Richard. Not Megan herself, she's still capable of being the person she should have been. But the version of her I shaped, the one who thinks buildings matter more than people, that version needs to be unmade. So this will isn't generosity, it's surgery. The money is yours. I know you don't want it. I know you'll give most of it away, probably to causes that help ex-convicts rebuild their lives. That's fine. That's expected. That's you. But I'm also leaving you Morrison and Cole. And here I'm asking something. Don't let the company die. Don't sell it off or shut it down. It employs over 2,000 people. Those people are innocent of my crimes. They deserve better than to be casualties of our family's dysfunction. But also don't let Megan have it back. Not yet. Not until she earns it. Not until she understands what I never taught her, that some things matter more than profit margins and skyline recognition. I've included documentation of everything. The original soil tests, the falsified reports, the wire transfers to the building inspector, all of it. Give it to the authorities if you want. Clear your name officially, or keep it private and let the truth live in the will. That's your choice. Finally, Richard, I'm sorry. I know those words are inadequate. I know sorry can't give you back 15 years, or restore your relationship with Megan, or undo the deaths of 3 innocent people. Sorry is just a word, but it's all I have left to give you, along with money you don't want and a company you never asked for. Use them better than I did. Catherine. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. The Chicago skyline sparkled like the circuit board of some massive machine. Somewhere out there, my daughter was probably sitting in a bar, or her apartment, or her car, trying to process the fact that everything she'd believed for 15 years was a lie. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant, something other than this strange, hollow tiredness. But all I felt was old. The next week was a blur of lawyers and accountants. Within 3 days, I had access to accounts containing more money than I could have spent in 3 lifetimes. Within 5 days, I had controlling interest in Morrison and Cole, and a board meeting scheduled to introduce myself as the new owner. Megan didn't contact me. I didn't contact her. We circled each other like boxers in the early rounds, waiting to see who would throw the first punch. On Wednesday, I met with the executive team. They were polite, professional, and clearly terrified. The convicted felon who'd supposedly corrupted building inspections was now their boss. "I'm not here to run this company," I told them in the boardroom that had once been Catherine's kingdom. "I don't have the desire, but I am here to ensure it runs ethically. There will be independent audits every quarter, a whistleblower protection system, ethics training that actually means something. Anyone caught cutting corners on safety will be gone, no exceptions." James Sullivan, Catherine's former right hand, cleared his throat. "And who will be CEO?" "You will. Interim CEO, pending board approval. You've been doing the job unofficially for years." Relief flickered across his face. "And Megan? She's been talking about legal challenges." I smiled, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Let her try. The will is solid, and my daughter needs to learn something her mother never taught her." "What's that?" "That some things matter more than winning." After the meeting, I walked through the building. My building now, though I could barely process that fact. The walls were covered with photographs of projects Morrison and Cole had designed. Museums, hospitals, office towers, the rebuilt Morrison Plaza, monuments to Catherine's vision, built on foundations of corruption. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown Chicago number. "Can we meet?" I stared at it for a long time. My daughter, reaching out after 15 years of silence, asking for something she'd never had to ask for before. I typed back, Saturday, 10 a.m. Lou Mitchell's on Jackson. Her response came immediately. I'll be there. Saturday morning was gray and cold, threatening snow. Lou Mitchell's was busy with the weekend breakfast crowd, tourists and locals mixing over pancakes and the famous donut holes they gave you while you waited for a table. I arrived early, ordered black coffee, and took a booth by the window. Megan arrived at exactly 10. She looked different, smaller somehow. No power suit today, just jeans and a peacoat. She spotted me, hesitated, then walked over like someone approaching a wild animal they weren't sure was friendly. Hi. Sit down. She slid into the booth across from me, ordered coffee from the waitress, then folded her hands on the table. Just like I used to do, just like Catherine used to do. I don't know where to start, she said. The beginning usually works. She almost smiled at that. Which beginning? There seemed to be several versions. The true one. That's always the best place to start. She took a breath. I remember you as the best dad in the world. You took me to job sites and let me wear a hard hat. You taught me to read blueprints. You told me I could design buildings that would stand for 1,000 years if I did the work right. You could. You still can. Then suddenly you were a criminal. Mom showed me the evidence. The bribes, the falsified reports. She said you'd confessed, pleaded guilty. And then those people died, and you were the reason. Her voice caught. I thought you cared more about money than about doing things right. I thought you were everything you'd taught me not to be. The waitress brought her coffee. Megan wrapped her hands around it but didn't drink. Then Mom died, she continued. And that letter. And suddenly everything I thought I knew was wrong. You didn't take bribes. You didn't falsify anything. 3 people died because of what Mom did, and you went to prison for it. And I've spent 15 years thinking you were a murderer. You didn't know. Your mother made sure you didn't know. But I should have. She looked up at me, eyes bright with tears. You were my father. I should have believed in you. You were 23. Your mother was your mentor, your boss, your hero. She showed you evidence. What else were you supposed to believe? The truth? The truth was buried under a mountain of lies and legal documents. Your mother built that mountain specifically so you'd never find it. I hate her for it. The words came out fierce. I hate that she lied. I hate that she let you suffer. I hate that she built everything on your sacrifice. I hate that she's dead and I can't scream at her. She was dying when she wrote that will. She had 18 months to reconsider, to take it back, to keep her secrets buried. She chose to tell the truth. That took something. Too little, too late. Maybe. But it's more than most people manage. Megan wiped her eyes with her napkin, a gesture so young it hurt to watch. I hired 4 different lawyers to contest the will. They all said the same thing. It's airtight. Mom made sure of that. She laughed bitterly. $38. That's what I'm worth. $1 for each year of my life. The CEO position I worked 15 years for gone. The inheritance I expected, gone. The mother I thought I knew never existed. She wanted you to start over, to learn what it means to earn something instead of inherit it. She wanted to punish me for being what she made me, maybe. Or maybe she wanted to save you from becoming what she was. Megan looked at me really, looked her expression raw and searching. What do you want, Dad? You have the money, the company, everything. You could destroy me. You could make sure I never work in architecture again. You could tell everyone what Mom did. I don't want revenge, Megan. Then what? It was a good question. What did I want? For 15 years, I'd wanted nothing. Trained myself to want nothing. Learned to live small, need little, expect less. Now I had everything, and I still didn't know what to do with it. I want you to be okay, I said finally. I want you to learn what your mother never did. That how you build something matters as much as what you build. That cutting corners costs more than it saves. That some prices are too high, no matter what you're buying. How am I supposed to learn that? I'm 38 years old. I don't know how to be anyone except who Mom made me. Then learn. Start over. Find out who Megan Morrison is when she's not Catherine Morrison's daughter or Richard Morrison's victim. Just Megan. I don't know how. Neither did I. 15 years ago, I was a convicted felon with no job, no money, no reputation, except as a corrupt architect who got people killed. I had to figure out how to be human again from scratch. How? By accepting the old life was gone. By finding value in small things. Fixing Mrs. Rodriguez's sink when she couldn't afford a plumber. Teaching the kid next door how to build a bookshelf. Volunteering at Habitat for Humanity on weekends. I smiled slightly. Small things. Honest things. Real things. Megan was crying now, not trying to hide it. I don't know if I can do that. You can. You're stronger than you think. I'm really not. You came here today. That took strength. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing. We sat in silence for a while, watching people pass on Jackson Boulevard, a young couple with a stroller, an old man walking a dog the size of a small horse, a group of tourists consulting a map like it was sacred scripture. What will you do with the company? Megan asked finally. Keep it running. Make it ethical. Try to turn it into something worth inheriting. And then give it back to you. Maybe. If you earn it. She nodded slowly. That's fair. Your mother left you $38, I said. I'm offering you a job, entry level. Administrative assistant in our new ethics compliance department. Minimum wage, no special treatment, no fast track. Megan's eyes widened. You're offering me a job? If you want it, if you're willing to start at the bottom, if you can handle taking orders from people who used to work for you. That's humiliating. Yes. Everyone will know. Everyone will talk. Probably. Why would you do that to me? I'm not doing it to you. I'm offering you a chance to do it for yourself. Your mother's will took away everything you thought you'd have. This is an opportunity to build something real. But only if you want it. She looked at her coffee, at the cream swirling on the surface. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. She stood, gathered her coat, then paused. Dad? Yeah? I'm sorry. For not believing in you. For the years we lost. For everything. I stood too, faced her across the worn formica table. I'm sorry too. For the burden you've carried. For not being there to teach you what really matters. Can we? She hesitated. Can we try again? Not pick up where we left off? But start fresh? I thought about that. Whether trust could be rebuilt. Whether 15 years of silence could be bridged by good intentions. We can try, I said. Trying is enough. She smiled, a small thing, but real, and walked out into the gray Chicago morning. I finished my coffee, left cash on the table, and stepped outside. The wind off the lake cut through my jacket, but I barely felt it. My mind was already moving forward, planning. The Morrison Foundation would need a director, someone who understood what happened when corners got cut. Someone who'd lived the consequences. The company would need restructuring, new protocols, real oversight, the kind of culture that made corruption impossible, not just inconvenient. And somewhere in all of that, there might be room for a daughter learning to be someone new, learning that the buildings you design matter less than the integrity you build them with. I took a cab to Graceland Cemetery, found Catherine's grave easily. Fresh earth, fresh flowers, a granite headstone with her name and dates, and an inscription I hadn't chosen. She built monuments, but forgot to build bridges. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets. I'll take care of the company, I said finally. And I'll take care of Megan, if she lets me. That's all I can promise. The wind rustled through the bare trees. November in Chicago, cold and honest. I turned and walked back toward the cemetery gates. My phone buzzed. A text from Megan. I've been thinking about that job offer. I typed back. And 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. When do I start? I smiled. The first real smile in 15 years. Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. Her response came immediately. I won't be. I put my phone away and hailed a cab to O'Hare. In a few hours, I'd be back in Phoenix. Back to my small apartment and my maintenance job and Mrs. Rodriguez's sink that still needed fixing. But now that life came with additions. A company to reshape, a foundation to build, a daughter to help find her way back to who she should have been. The plane took off into a sky, turning gold with sunset, carrying me west toward home and forward toward whatever came next. Below, Chicago shrank to toy size, glass towers and frozen lakefront, and the graves of secrets finally told. Catherine was gone. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the dead get to stop carrying the weight of their choices, even if the living have to keep carrying ours. I thought about Megan, probably sitting in her apartment right now, staring at a closet full of designer suits she wouldn't need anymore. Monday, she'd show up in something practical, ready to learn what her mother never taught her, that the foundation matters more than the facade, that integrity is structural, that some buildings stand for centuries while others collapse because someone decided cutting corners was worth the risk. 3 people died because Catherine made that decision. I went to prison because I let her. Megan grew up believing lies because we both chose silence over truth. But now the silence was broken. The truth was out. And maybe, just maybe, that meant something could finally be built right. The pilot announced our descent into Phoenix. Outside the window, the desert spread out like a promise, empty and harsh, and full of space to start over. I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes. Monday morning, my daughter would show up for her first day at an entry-level job. She'd make copies and file paperwork and learn that the work matters more than the title. And eventually, maybe years from now, she'd understand that the $38 her mother left her was worth more than $175 million, because it came with a lesson no amount of money could buy: how to build something that won't collapse, how to be someone worth being, how to earn what you have instead of inheriting what you didn't deserve. The plane touched down as the sun set behind the mountains. Phoenix welcomed me back with warm wind and the smell of creosote after rain. Home, for now, until the next chapter started. And for the first time in 15 years, I was looking forward to finding out how the story would end.